it's something you would hope would improve through time, I suppose, is accuracy of films. But it's incredibly patchy throughout the history of filmmaking. In fact, some of the best, the most accurate stuff you'll see is stuff that was made during or just after the war, which I suppose in a way is not surprising because
the knowledge is there, isn't it?
The stuff was available, and the knowledge was there. It was all brand new at the time. There was tons of the stuff about. The other thing, of course, is there's then a gap where there isn't readily available reproduction stuff available to purchase. But now there is. So film companies have less. They don't even have to have a wardrobe department come up with something, themselves. They can literally just buy stuff off the peg.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to, they could go. Obviously, a lot of the stuff for the reenacting market is made in India and Pakistan. They could easily go direct to source and buy this in bulk for very low prices, I'm sure. So I think in the modern context, there's no real excuse for film companies not to get it right, because the knowledge is still there. The knowledge hasn't gone anywhere. In fact, in some instances, it's better understood now than it was at the time.
Yeah.
In certain detail, if you're doing a very specific small unit, perhaps was somewhat hush hush, up until recently. So yeah, I mean, are we talking particularly individual kit here and uniform and so forth,
as
opposed
I think
to vehicles and heavy weapons and things like that?
Yeah, I'm focusing more on that because I want to make this more of a resource for filmmakers who don't necessarily have the budget or time to go through a bunch of research and have, and people who are doing that sort of film won't be having vehicles or anything like that. So,
no. The basic line is, I mean, obviously, unless you're covering a specific unit where they had specific equipment like airborne forces.
Yeah.
The uniform and equipment is pretty standard. It's battle dress. Again, that's readily available on the market. The correct patterns are basically three: battle dress serge, 1940 pattern, and 1942 or 1940 utility pattern has two names, depending on what time period you're looking at. I think the web equipment, again, although there are some changes visually, it doesn't change that much throughout the war. The kind of entrenching tool, the kind of little shovels that were carried change. So the carriers for those change, but the basic web equipment in terms of the haversack on your back, the basic patches in front of the belt, and the braces don't really change. So, that's easy enough to get right. Again, there's plenty of stuff available in terms of reproduction stuff that's not that expensive. And it would do for filmmaking. I mean, obviously, I would say for reenactors, try and get original. But if you're filmmaking, it's not, you've not got maybe the 5-yard rule. You've got it's behind the, it's in camera rule.
Yeah.
So you can.
Well, I think one concept that I've come across quite a lot is the idea of having your hero characters who have more accurate kit that is is going to be closer to the camera, and then you have your extras and your background characters who aren't as involved, who have cheaper stuff.
Quite so, yeah. You might want your, web equipment wise, it's still easy to get real web equipment. So you might have your hero character in real period kit, and then, as you say, your extras and so forth in the background. Not so. One great advantage of the huge reenacting community, of course, is you can put the word out for extras fully equipped. And I know that they've recently been filming something near me for Dunkirk. They've used the beaches near me. And they've asked for, I didn't get involved with it. I didn't have time, unfortunately. And seeing some of the photos, that's the other thing, is the quality of the reenactor can vary somewhat. I think I dodged a bullet. But as I say, it varies, as I say, not really through time. It varies entirely from film to film and how much effort they put in.
Yeah.
As to whether or not it's accurate or not. And I'm not talking even minute detail. I'm talking sort of basic things like that's a 1970s leather holster from a completely different country.
Yeah.
Which you've added on for no reason. Why have you added that on? No one carried that, sort of thing. So it's almost they add too much kit sometimes. That's a classic one, which reenactors do as well, of course. They would have used it if they had it, but they didn't have it, so they didn't use it, sort of thing. In the 80s, the British soldiers and stuff were allowed to customized their equipment and so forth a lot more than they were even in the 60s or 70s, and certainly in the Second World War. By and large, there are minor exceptions, but by and large, you wore what you were told to wear, and you were told how to wear it. So everyone looked the same, pretty much.
Yeah.
There are exceptions, there are variations, but that's when looking at a specific unit in a specific scenario. If you're looking for generic Private Thompson, he's going to look very much like any other private in the British Army for a given year. So uniformity is one of the biggest things. You want a group of soldiers in uniform, not a ragtag bunch of chaps all wearing different bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that does come up in some instances is, again, if they have a historical advisor who actually served later, again in the 80s, they bring a bit of their customizing of kit to, and I've seen that crop up, and you think, yeah, I know where they've got that from, but it's not right for the 1940s.
Yeah, I think sometimes they do that, especially with hero characters, to help with identifying which character's which. I think that's probably the exception to that as a rule.
Possibly so, yeah. But the thing is, of course, it is. If you want to do that, it's the choice of the filmmaker, of course. Yeah. It's their film, but it's not accurate. So, from an accuracy point of view, the thing with that is that I think you could work that into a story of. Well, not in a story, but you have them, maybe if they're joining or whatever, you can have them as the individual. But then obviously once they are in the ranks, if they are in the ranks, if they're not an officer, obviously depends on their rank and so forth. There may well be distinguishing features if they're an NCO or an officer. But as I say, that's entirely up to the filmmaker. This is the whole thing with accuracy of uniforms and so forth. It's entirely based on the desire of the filmmaker and how much time and effort they want to. Yeah. And whether it fits what they're trying to do, because if it's historical accuracy isn't everything, and there are always going to be people who will criticize a film based on its accuracy of details of uniform. I mean, you could make a film that brilliantly follows a chronology and is very accurate from that point of view, actually tells the history very correctly, but people, if you wore the wrong uniform doing it, there will still be people who criticize that. So, it's almost another layer on it, is you can tell a very accurate historical story, but then, and do lots of research from the big picture point of view and not do it for uniform and stuff. Or conversely, you can do it the other way and have everyone dressed really well, but then the story's completely anachronistic So, as I say, that's the whole thing with this line of thought, is it's entirely down to the desire of the filmmaker and what they want to do. Now, I, as a reenactor and a collector and interested in the military kit and so forth, as well as big picture stuff, obviously I always like when you see a film and you can see they've gone to the effort, even if it's not perfect, you go, oh, they've really tried to capture the look.
Yeah.
And that's
about getting the impression right, isn't it? It's not necessarily about every single detail. It's knowing the basics to get the image correct.
Absolutely. A chap in battle dress, ankle boots, anklets, 1937 pattern web equipment, the rifle, depending on time, the time period that's being shown, the number 1 Mark III or the number 4, depending on time period, and generally Mark II helmets. And that's the thing with the British Tommy look. It's very distinctive, that Super Bowl helmet and everything else. It immediately sets the scene and the time period. And that's one reason I think it's worth getting it half right, is that it does nicely sell that. It's a very distinctive look, a very well-known and homely look, I think would be fair to say. The British Tommy of World War II, there are enough, sort of old posters and things that have been reproduced, and that image of the British soldier and obviously the Home Guard, Dad's Army, etc. as well. It's a very well-known image to the British public.
Instantly recognised,
So it's worthwhile getting it halfway right, I would say. And to do, perhaps to do justice to this historical material, although I think getting the bigger picture stuff right, if you're trying to be historically accurate in your story about what's going on at the time, that's more important in terms of respecting history.
Yeah.
If obviously, even though the story of a production may be outside of actual historical events, if what's going on around it is in and makes up. An example I'll give is Peaky Blinders. And they have a bit where Churchill's talking in Peaky Blinders, and he says, "How many people were at the Battle of the Somme? How many people were at Verdun?" And it's like, no, Verdun was a French battle, right? That's actually quite, that jarred with me as someone who has not even a particularly deep knowledge of the First World War. The Verdun is very much the French versus the Germans. So Churchill bringing it up, trying to shame a group of men in his office who didn't serve during the Great War, who were all British, it was a stupid little mistake, and it's easily avoidable. I think that sort of thing is more important, perhaps, than uniform detail and so forth, from respecting history. But it's still not a reason to not take the uniform side of things seriously.
Yeah.
I may be wandering all over the place with this, so I apologise if that's the case. If you do, please feel free to direct me at any point to specific points you want to talk about.
I can always do some editing, some strategic editing.
Strategic editing, yeah, absolutely.
But I think really, it's an interesting point actually, because quite often I think the story kind of focuses too much on the storytelling of from a filmmaker's perspective. You're always focused about the story that you're trying to tell, and it's quite easy to lose track of the details that are relevant to something that is actually set in reality.
Yes. I completely get it. That's the whole thing. It's an art form. You have a story to tell, and that's the importance. The whole point of the film is to get that story across in an engaging manner, and I get that. But I don't think that sparing a little time to fit that into historic events is, it detracts from that storytelling process. I don't think so anyway. From I'm a layman in terms of filmmaking. Obviously, I don't know, but I don't think there's anything to be lost by something being, making sure something isn't anachronistic.
And that's exactly kind of what I think about the same with the equipment and the historical framework is the point. The point I want to make with this report is I want to say there's no reason to get this stuff wrong, because it won't make your film worse. It won't take away from the story.
No, absolutely not. No, I suppose in a limited resources scenario where someone's working with limited resources, it may be that they have very limited resources to dedicate to doing that, and then obviously telling the story, etc., is more important and takes more of the time, whatever the limiting factor is, be it time, be it money, whatever. I understand that, but as you say, where you do have those resources available, and freely offered by some people, in terms of critique and so forth, engage with them and talk to them, obviously there's a lot of stuff on my channel in terms of looking at kit and when things were introduced, dates of introduction. Obviously, for someone who's never looked at it before, I understand it's a minefield. I get that, but the basics are actually pretty simple. So you can get bogged down in the minefield and lose sight of that central thing of what did the basic soldier look like. And that's the thing to focus on. If it's a soldier, if it's a sailor, obviously that's different, and airman. But they're all three of them, the basic private, airman, or matlow, they're all seamen. Sorry, I'm using the slang term. The uniform is very basic. And once you get down to it, they are pretty easy to reproduce. And as I say, that's one of the things I think is people sometimes try and over-egg the pudding. That can lead to disaster.
I think it's just a case of taking the time to do the research and understand what it is you're trying to portray. And I think quite often that the problem filmmakers who don't have much of a background in anything to do with history, I think the mistake they make is they don't know what it is that they've not researched.
Yes,
they don't go in depth enough.
A good example, I think, of a film where you can look at it and go, okay, the historical accuracy has it's not. Historical accuracy is not a priority of this movie, and yet they did quite a good job. Is Jojo Rabbit. And they actually did a fairly good, from my knowledge of German kit and uniform, it's exaggerated, obviously, for comedic effect. The Gestapo all wear black coats and black hats. Although, if you actually read, that's actually quite almost, it's an exaggeration to make a historical point, because there's actually a German writer who noted that the Gestapo were the worst secret police who ever existed, because they did all dress like that, or to a degree. But if you look in there, there's the things like at the end, you see the kids wearing the last ditch uniforms that are made out of cardboard and stuff like that. Okay, again, that's an exaggeration, but it's not that far from the truth. And the actual, the German uniforms, the ranks and so forth is really quite well done, considering it's a comedy film, a comedy film. And that's not the priority of the filmmaker at all. They actually did a pretty good job. So it's quite interesting to see that even a film like that, they did pay a little bit of attention detail to uniforms and things like that. I guess it sets the scene, sets the historical scene.
Yeah, I'm sure they have obviously good researchers doing that.
yeah, but it's away from it's moving away from what you would consider a war film, where you more normally expect to see chaps in uniform and so forth, to a film set during the war, but definitely not a war film in the way we'd normally consider it. And oddly, is often war films that have some of the worst offenders in terms of that. You watch period costume dramas who have incidental characters who happen to be in uniform, and they're often pretty good. Generally, I think in those instances, because they go out for extras who maybe we need a British soldier. Who do we, and they put a calling card out, and someone will say, "I'm a reenactor, I have the kit," and they'll go along. But often they'll get incidental characters in the background more accurate than, say, a war film might, getting a whole squad of soldiers together. It's quite interesting.
I suppose with that, it might even be a case of quantity, because they've just got, with a war film, they need
absolutely.
More people. So it might be that they've spread their resources a bit thin.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's an odd one, because there are the resources in terms of knowledge base are out there. But as I say, when you first look at it, if you're not in contact with people who can advise, it does appear to be an insurmountable mountain of information.
Well, with the internet, I suppose it's just a matter of you just got to take the time to find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything.
Yeah.
I think that's almost what I've been doing, because I've only really got into militaria, collecting stuff, that sort of thing, since lockdown started. I was always into the subject before that, but I never really got into it. And the internet is just a treasure trove for that sort of thing once you get into it, and that is the key. I think it's having the mindset that you're going to get that, you're going to knuckle down and find all the information that you need.
It's a mine of photographs. I mean, there are lots of original photographs from different years during the war of different units. You might even be able to find the specific unit you're looking for. So that's very useful. The internet has been a blessing and a curse, in that it's a blessing in that all this stuff is available. It's a curse in that all this stuff is available, and there's so much to wade through. That can be daunting. And I've been reenacting now for 10 years, but just over 10 years, and collecting, and I still have a huge amount to learn. But I know I could put together a British soldier. Whereas you've seen the American in the Month, I can put them together for all sorts of different periods accurately, generally based on photographs, but it's a mesh together of being able to interpret that photograph, look at what they're carrying, how they're carrying it, why they're carrying it that way, so forth.
Well, it's not enough just to look at it. You've got to understand why it's like that as well. And I think that's important for filmmaking as well, because obviously as a film, it's moving. You've got to be able to tell people how it is they're supposed to be using stuff. It's like I can't remember what it was, but recently, someone in a group I know, someone put an image from something in, and a soldier was holding his rifle from the hip, and it was but it was, and he had his hand over the top. It was like over the top of the handguard, and it was like, that just looks really odd.
Looks really awkward. It's amazing. I've always thought when you give someone a gun, they hold it like a gun. They'll hold it like a rifle or whatever, but people don't. People hold things in the weirdest way when you give them things sometimes. I've seen that with the public at reenacting events. You'll give them a rifle to hold and look at, and you can't trust everyone to hold it correctly, intuitively. And that's weird to me, because I've always thought of it as being intuitive. But it's because I realize now, of course, it's because I've had the interest. I've looked at enough photos that before I was ever able to handle a gun, I knew how to hold it correctly. From having that sort of intrinsic, you've seen enough people do it. I mean, it's part of the primate brain, obviously, but doing it from photographs rather than imitating other people. So yeah, that's a very good point, is you need to make sure that people are not only wearing the equipment correctly, but they are moving correctly in it and holding things correctly if they're holding stuff.
Yeah.
A good example as well is, if they're wearing web equipment, it's good to have the haversack weighted similar to what it would be, which is like mess tins and soft kit, and the ammunition pouches to be weighted similarly correctly, so they're not just bouncing around. Yeah. And it could be a wooden block, maybe not weighted correctly, but something in them to give them a little bit of weight. Otherwise, they don't give that can help a lot as well. It makes the person who's wearing them move more like they're carrying a load, which is is useful. It just someone said, I can't remember who it was now. There was an actor who once said something along those lines was, when I'm playing a role, if I'm carrying a heavy load, I expect to be carrying a heavy load to remind me that I'm carrying a heavy load so that I can act like I'm carrying a heavy load. Something along, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact quote, but someone said, it's very much easier to act if your prop is doing what it should do.
Yeah.
Rather than, just being full of, cardboard or whatever, packed out with cardboard.
Well, I've found that because I've been, for the journalism project that I was talking to you about, I did a short kind of live action bit out in the garden with all my kit on, and I packed it with a bunch of stuff. I packed the pouches out with like sections of floorboard, I think they were.
Yes, yeah.
It was much heavier than I expected, actually, because I've not really put it all on.
This is it, because it weighs enough on its own, and once it's loaded, it's really quite heavy. And again, that's available. The loading tables on the weight people carried are available on Khaki Web, which is a good resource on the web equipment specifically, including fitting instructions, which tell you how to put it together.
Yeah, that's one of the sources that I've got listed for.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's very in depth, so you can skim it, but it gives you the dates of when it's were introduced and so forth, which is useful. It's I think it's a difficult one with the accuracy stuff, because for me it can detract from an otherwise good film, whereas obviously for someone who isn't a nerd wouldn't get that detraction from their enjoyment at all. So I suppose it's difficult to argue to people sometimes, because it appeals to a limited audience in terms of the people who are really going to pick up the nitty gritty. But as you've said earlier, there's no harm in getting
exactly
it. And those who do know will go, well done, or just be, appreciative of the effort.
Well, it makes everyone happy, doesn't it? There's no disadvantage to doing it.
And there is also the thing to say that if you can get things horrendously wrong to the point that someone who doesn't know who is a layman will still think it looks wrong. So if you get it absolutely right, or as close as possible, then it's going to look right to someone who knows their stuff and the layman without question. So it's almost it's an element of safety in terms of you've got it looking right. It's weird. If we can talk about a terrible film very briefly, it was Age of Heroes with Danny Dyer. Do you know of?
I've not heard of it at all. No, probably because it's not very good.
You should watch it. It's hilarious. I think it's freely available online. They got and Sean Bean as well, who obviously will appear in lower budget stuff. It's a shocking job, and the everything's wrong. The way the military prison he busts out of is wrong. The way it operates is wrong. Sorry, the uniforms are wrong. They've made some effort but failed miserably despite that, which is really sad to see. And some of the stuff is original and things, but it's worn badly. It's assembled incorrectly. There are many anachronisms. The story, is not primarily what we're here to talk about, but the story's pretty terrible. And it's just a hot mess, basically, of a film. And another thing they get wrong in it really is one thing that is the appearance of the people as well. Is there are very really were sort of set standards for how men had their hair cut, so forth, particularly in the military. But as a time period, anyway, there were very much things that were in fashion and short back at sides was in a big way.
Yeah.
Particularly in the military, obviously, but civilians as well from that time period we're talking about, the Second World War. And that's another thing they missed out on. They didn't have chaps with the correct haircuts, and that's important as well. So, and it's not hard to achieve. The short back and sides, you go to any barber, they'll give you a short back and sides. So it's not provided the actors involved are happy to do that. But Age of Heroes is worth a watch. Even if you've not been long into reenacting, you will have a laugh at how bad it is, I'm sure. So going back to the leather holster thing, in Age of Heroes, that's wasted money. There's absolutely no purpose for them, and they're wrong. So why they bought them, I don't know.
And it's bearing in mind also a narrative purpose for anything you're going to get, because if you're on a budget, then if you're going to get something, it needs to have a reason to be on camera. And
absolutely,
if you're going to have someone with a sidearm, then give them a case, give them something correct, but make sure they use it. Otherwise, there's no point in it being there.
Exactly, and in the case of someone, if they have a rifle, why get them a sidearm? Have them use the rifle. It would be a private or an NCO would generally have a rifle or perhaps a Sten submachine gun like you have behind you. They wouldn't be carrying they wouldn't be carrying a sidearm. So again, why give them a sidearm? Why waste those resources to enact an inaccuracy when you could have them use their long arm that they'd be carrying, either a submachine gun, machine carbine as termed at the time, or a rifle? That's what they'd have. So why give them another weapon when that's, unless if you wanted it for narrative, have them pick up a pistol or sidearm off a dead enemy. If you wanted it to be more historically fitting, there's a German officer, grab the Luger, and that pistol they would use and go for that. So it's and again, that's a way that actually historical accuracy can limit the number of resources you have to dedicate to certain things like that. As I say again, if you're dressing all your chaps alike, it's often slightly cheaper to buy stuff in bulk.
Yeah.
So you can bulk order sets of web equipment or borrow or loan. There are companies which loan this stuff out. But generally, if you're going for stuff being uniform, it's generally a bit cheaper than having everyone custom. So that's that's another argument for doing things correctly, and that is to say uniformly. Because it can have financial benefits to it as well, or resource benefits, whichever way you want to look.
And if you want to do something to make a character stand out, if you're afraid about characters getting confused or whatever, then you can use something small like a pair of gloves or a scarf, something that's less.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely. Exactly so. Yeah, because that's the sort of thing, particularly in a winter scene, as you say. Chaps were allowed to wear slightly less uniform cold weather kit, knitted comforts that were sent from home. So that's certainly a way you can do it. Definitely. Trying to think of other ways you can, chaps perhaps wearing a bit more, different camouflage pattern on the helmet in terms of scrim and stuff, that sort of thing. If your chap isn't an NCO or an officer who obviously would wear distinguishing badges on their uniform, then that's the sort of thing you can use as little personalizations like cold weather gear, or like a helmet camouflaged in a particular manner would be quite a good one, because there was some uniformity to it, but blokes did camouflage the helmets themselves, so there would be variation there. And
it was largely a case of the foliage that was the environment you're in, wasn't it? I think
to a degree, yeah. But generally, men actually had nets on with scrim, which is torn up sandbag. But you could have a chap with done it slightly differently, and that's a good way of differentiating. Because sometimes you'd have access to scrim which was in different colours and things like this, so you could have one chap marked out that way, which wouldn't be that ahistorical, and could work quite well. But as I say, that's the sort of thing that the filmmaker needs to make the compromise on, because generally men wear uniform. But if you need to pick someone out, then that's a compromise, or clever methodology needs to be found for that if you want them to remain in with the crowd and yet distinct from.
Yeah, I mean, it's about blending the two things. It's about getting absolutely. What needs to be gotten right, but knowing what you can get wrong almost.
Knowing what you can get away with, what someone might have used as a. The sort of uniform regulations which were broken. A good example might be the collar unbutton, things like that. You have everyone out. If your chap's the slightly diamond in the rough, rebellious diamond in the rough type, then he might have his collar undone, for example. It could be a point that the sergeant's always picking him up on, and yet he undoes it every time it's not seen, by the sergeant. And men in the field did. When they were on the march, they did undo their blouses, but you could leave everyone else's done up as a way of showing this chap. You could have a particularly nasty NCO who wants everyone to have their battleless blouses. Again, perhaps not particularly historically accurate to have someone with that attitude in the field. Then again, maybe, I don't know every NCO who existed at the time, but it would give you a good mechanism to show, an individual with a very small modification to the outfit, the uniform, and having the collar quite nice. And it would fit well with a character who was a bit rebellious or, a bit slovenly, but actually is a good fighter or whatever.
But it adds texture as well, doesn't it? It adds texture to the characters, it adds texture to the story, it adds a level of kind of believability to it as well, that you use something that is kind of not necessarily accurate but believable to bring that texture, but within reasonable boundaries of what you can work within. Because that is the thing when you're making any historical setting, you have to work within the boundaries of what actually happened to a certain extent.
Absolutely. So another thing you might see perhaps is a pipe sticking out of the top pocket or something like that. Little things like that could be used as identifiers potentially, if you wanted to stay well within the realm of period accuracy. So in the summer, have his collar undone. In the winter, have him wearing a scarf. That sort of thing. As you say, that's a nice way of doing that doesn't override how kit was worn at the time.